leading others to freedom. Harriet made 19 dangerous trips back to the South. She ignored her own danger to become a conductor of the Underground Railroad. She guided escaping slaves from one safe resting place to another. A station on the Underground Railroad was usually an abolitionist's home. Sometimes it was a church or another safe resting place. Some of the stations had secret rooms to hide the escaping slaves. In 1850, the United States passed the Fugitive Slave Act. This was a law that made the northern states return any escaped slaves to their owners. Now, Harriet had to conduct her passengers all the way to Canada to find freedom. Harriet helped many of her own family out of the South. Thanks to Harriet, 6 of her 10 brothers and sisters escaped. On one difficult journey, she brought her elderly parents north to Canada. Harriet led about 300 slaves north to freedom. Nothing was more important to her than helping others become free. One famous abolitionist, John Brown, called Harriet Tubman one of the bravest persons on this continent. Many called Harriet a master of disguise. Sometimes she dressed as an old woman, sometimes she dressed as a man. It is said that one day she met one of her former owners and he didn't recognize her. Harriet was clever in other ways. She hired men to rip down wanted posters that described runaway slaves. Runaway notices weren't put in newspapers on weekends. They had to wait until Monday morning. Harriet began escapes on Saturday nights in order to have a head start. Slave owners were so angry they offered a reward for Harriet's capture, dead or alive. The reward was $40,000. This was a huge amount of money for those days. One day, Harriet heard a man reading her own wanted poster. It described Harriet as not being able to read. She immediately pulled out a book and pretended to read it. So the man left without giving her a second look. On April 12, 1861, the Civil War began. The North and the South fought each other over the right to own slaves. During the war, Harriet worked as a nurse for the North's Union Army. She was also a spy. She tried to find the Southern Army's weapon warehouses. She also continued to travel into the South to lead slaves north. When the Civil War ended in 1865, slavery was against the law in the United States. Harriet remarried and lived in Auburn, New York. She sold vegetables door to door. Harriet was very poor, yet she turned her own house into a home for needy people. She worked for aid and education for freed slaves. Harriet also fought for the right of women to vote. Harriet Tubman died March 10, 1913. She devoted her long life to freedom. She will always be remembered as a true hero. Number 6. Read the dictionary definition below. Noun. 1. A person who advocated or supported the end of slavery in the U.S. 2. A person who favors the ending of any law or practice deemed harmful to society. Which word from the passage best matches the dictionary entry? A. Conductor. B. Abolitionist. C. Station. D. Slave. Number 7. Part A. Select the sentence that gives the best conclusion that can be drawn about the author's opinion of Harriet Tubman. A. She was very poor. B. She was clever. C. She was dangerous. D. She was a slave. Part B. Underline the sentences in the paragraph that best support your answer to Part A. Choose 2. She hired men to rip down wanted posters that described runaway slaves. Runaway notices weren't put in newspapers on the weekends. They had to wait until Monday morning. Harriet began escapes on Saturday nights in order to have a head start. Number 8. Who did Harriet Tubman work for during the Civil War? A. A library. B. The North's Union Army. C. The Southern Army's weapon warehouse. D. A farmer. 9. Part A. Read the sentences. Harriet was very poor, yet she turned her own house into a home for needy people. She worked for aid and education for freed slaves. Harriet also fought for the right of women to vote. What did the author most likely mean by using the detail, Harriet also fought for the right of women to vote? A. The author wanted to show that Harriet thought everyone should be able to vote. B. The author wanted to show that Harriet continued to support women. C. The author wanted to show that Harriet continued to fight for basic rights and freedoms. D. The author wanted to show that Harriet didn't care that she didn't have much money. 10. Part B. Which paragraph from the passage best supports your answer to Part A? A. Paragraph 1. B. Paragraph 3. C. Paragraph 8. D. Paragraph 10.